Presentation, Professor Mira Sensei. We would like to call on the Professor Wakabayashi Sensei for his comments first, followed by Ota-san. So Wakabayashi-san, please.
Hi. I'm currently a professor at Tokyo University of Science Graduate School, MOT, and same time a member of MITI semiconductor panel. So I'm proud that the first commentator and chip war in Japanese version. So in the Japanese, in 90s, I was analyst. As an analyst, I have a sense of urgency about Japanese semiconductor companies as a harsh analyst. Now, it's together than I imagined. So I'm soft-spoken. So during time, I was troubled by the friction between Japanese and the United States. So it's my long-term my questions. So, but Professor Miller's book Chip War gave me a good answer. Professor Miller considers the semiconductor industry not only from the perspective of technology, but also from a wide range of perspectives, including innovators, figures, management strategies, finance, education, supply chains, and national security. It's long-term and it's very great. In particular, Japan should pay attention to the perspective of fairness from a global perspective, free riding contribution to the world economy. And in terms of the future vision, it is important to contribute on the Western countries. On the other hand, the input in Japan is somewhat inefficient. So, excuse me, that I think about NAND Flash and Dr. Masoka's, it is inefficient. So I think the person who invented the NAND was is Dr. Masoka, a former professor of Tohoku University. Also, it was Toshiba, not Intel. That put into the particular use at the time. It was called NAND type EEPROM. Intel Stefan Lai invested NOR flash memory, known as the time of flash EEPROM. So, but I think that this very great book, so it's very, very informative for Japanese. So I think the world industry structure, I think consider 4 layers, from top to bottom. Finance, software, and platforms, and science technology, and manufacturing. If we challenge to the top 2 layers, we will lose. Now Japan can once again contribute to the world as a production base. In telecommunications, Japan and the United States are weak. It's very strong in China. So that means we very hope rapid success and Japanese semiconductor comeback. It contributes not only to B2C market, but more contribute to B2G and B2B. The great application is maybe data center, beyond 5G, 6G, base stations. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Wakabayashi-sensei. So, Ota-san, please.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for having me here. Without further ado, I just step into my comments, some couple observations I have as a journalist, not as an expert. One is the issue of who is us. The West is the fuzzy notion. The US, EU, and Japan is Taiwan included. The people in Taiwan are Chinese, right? So they have relatives and families in mainland China, and investment and communication and the move of the people are significant between 2 spheres in both directions. So we cannot really assume that Taiwan is part of, we cannot assume that the Taiwan is part of the West. But Maurice Chan, the founder of TSMC, is criticizing CCP heavily because he's from China, and his family was forced to leave their mother town, their hometown, by CCP. Even he was infant a long time ago. So he criticized the U.S., China, as well as the U.S. Actually, he started criticizing the U.S., saying that free trade is ended because of the something called industrial policy. So the people in Taiwan, they don't want to be seen as a 51st state of the United States. And we need to reassess the result of the consequence of the local election, which has taken place in November. And the incumbent DPP has lost by wide margin to the opposition KMT. And President Tsai had to step down from the position of the chair of the party. So then what about Singapore or Malaysia or Vietnam or even Indonesia? We see a very dense supply chain crossing in East Asia, and including those ASEAN member states, right? So they are not singing in one voice. We don't hear the comfortable harmony from them. So we have to think about what is alliance. I don't think when it comes to Asia, I don't really think that the West doesn't look strong enough to create a safe supply chain. In order to work with the Asian nations, we need to have convincing narratives and the tangible economic benefit for them, so which I don't really think that's being given by yet by political leaders and policymakers. I don't really mean I conclude Mr. Nishikawa, but we expect some tangible policy. Then the second one I want to make is economic stability. I think that I heard that $1 trillion and the production cost will be increased by 100 billion. This is the voice from the industry of America, so I don't really think this is the accurate figures, but it is possible that they have to spend a lot of money. So then who is going to pay that cost? Obviously, the consumers are not ready for cost-push semiconductor inflation. And does Apple raise the price of iPhone? I don't really think so. So then what we see now is a significant amount of money poured by the government subsidization. So I don't really think this is sustainable. So particularly in Japan, we are already in a deep deficit, fiscal deficit, so there's no money to spend. So Japanese government, I think, cannot keep spending money on industry forever. So more or less, I think it's the same in the US and China. So we have to think about the sustainability issues, economic sustainability. So otherwise, we will all fall together. Not only the US and China and Japan, but also all the countries who is sitting in somewhere in the supply chain, complex supply chain in Asia. So military threat is imminent, I'm sure about that, no doubt about that. But the economic risk is imminent too. So, so we will end up with being at the stage where we should talk about sustainability, and I think we have to draw a clear line. What is to define the precise definition of the sensitive technology and regular technology, which the free trade is intact. I stop here, so I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Oda-san. But before going to the discussion, maybe the audience is have curiosity about your presentation about the Soviet. You
Oh yeah, that's right.
About the slide?
I just made a couple of research on the Russian semiconductors, and there are 2 or 3 major companies who is producing the semiconductor, and 2 of them, as Professor Miller is familiar with, I'm just made just a small research, and those 2 are very good in designing the semiconductor because of thanks to the Cold War, they have different technological system there, so they don't really need to independent on the West technology. So they have a capability to design, but they do not produce them. So they had to ask TSMC to fabricate those chips. But now the supply chain is cut between the Russia and Asia. So I just wonder what's going to happen next. So what I see is they're importing a lot from China now. So I checked this for years. The trade between the Russia and China China started exporting a significant number of chips. So this is not quite the situation we are expecting. So that means China is in better position politically on Russia. So this makes the big change in the structure of the relation between Soviet and Russia and China.
Thank you, Ota-san. Thank you for the excellent comment from the two guests. Maybe that we have another 15 minutes to discussion. Maybe we had better start from the response from the Mira Sensei to the two guests' comments. Especially the Wakabayashi Sensei seems to emphasize the importance of the contribution or the collaboration, global collaboration, and individual respective role in that global collaboration, especially in Japan. How you think about his comment and how you have an image of the Japanese role among the global, friends. And the second is then, Ota-san pointed out, but by the way, what is the alliance? Especially in the East Asia, very, the complicated, lots of stakeholders, geopolitical things, as well as the economical things, family things, everything is happening in the Asia. How we should define the alliance with the friends. And also the economic risk, economic stability is a very important thing in reality. But if you have any, comments to them, please.
Well, thank you for both of those interesting and helpful sets of comments. I would respond with three thoughts of my own. I think first on the question of the international supply chain, there's no doubt today that no country in the world has a plausible chance of going it alone on semiconductors. No one will be self-sufficient. If you want to make an advanced chip today, you've got to acquire intellectual property and software tools from multiple different countries, machine tools from multiple different countries. And that has been one of the key drivers of efficiency and technological advance. It's only possible to make chips as precise and capable as we have today, thanks to the fact that the international supply chain is so complex. That's allowed the types of investment and specialization that make semiconductors at the current advanced level possible. So we should recognize the fact that self-sufficiency is not possible and that we need an international supply chain and we need global markets to fund the types of R&D and capital investment that advanced semiconductors require. I think what you've seen over the past several decades is certain countries have specialized in certain types of capabilities. United States in chip design, Europe and Japan on machine tools and materials, Taiwan and Korea on fabrication. And in many ways, that's worked quite well. The challenge is when it creates risks of over-concentration in a specific geography. And I think, if you ask me what type of concentration do I worry about, I don't worry about the fact that the company ASML in the Netherlands produces 100% of the world's most advanced lithography machines. That's complete reliance of the rest of the world on one company, but based in the Netherlands, I'm not that concerned about it. But I think there are other dependencies that we have more reason to be concerned about, and dependency in the Taiwan Straits, I think, is the best example of that. That relates to the second comment I'd like to make, which is about who is the we we're talking about, or what is the alliance. And certainly every government has somewhat different views on these issues. I think I often find when talking to people within governments themselves have different views on these issues, and companies, of course, have complex views too. I am struck, though, by the extent to which in Europe, in the United States, and in Japan, there has been a comparable trajectory over the past 5 years in thinking about this issue, and greater concern about supply chain risks in the Taiwan Straits, and in the sense that something must be done to find ways to reduce this reliance. And the fact that each of those three countries are beginning to spend funds and take efforts to try to reduce this reliance, I think suggests that dependence is widely recognized. But certainly the process of managing relations with Taiwan is an extraordinarily complex issue, especially because many countries are simultaneously trying to become less dependent on Taiwan in terms of semiconductor production, while simultaneously trying to help defend Taiwanese autonomy vis-a-vis Beijing. So that's a complex relationship that has to be managed very carefully. Third, on the question of economic risks, I think there are absolute economic risks involved here. One is that in the chip industry in particular, as governments spend more, we have a problem of overcapacity in the future. Now, I don't worry that much about overcapacity at the leading edge, the most advanced nodes, because I think the track record of the past 15 years suggests that there's always demand for leading edge nodes. But in memory and in lagging edge logic, I think there's more scope for overcapacity. It's an issue that's got to be tracked carefully. I think the biggest risk, though, in terms of contribution to overcapacity is the lagging edge logic build out happening underway in China right now, where over the past decade, there's been very little concern whatsoever to commercial viability or profitability. And the scale of government subsidies is far beyond what is being proposed in other locations. And so actually, I think that's the key challenge over the next several years in terms of overcapacity. And then finally, on the differentiation of civilian and military technology, which I think is an absolutely core question. In the past, it was easy to say, we're not going to send militarily relevant technology to other countries because we knew what type of technology was used for military systems. Everyone agrees that missile components or explosives are military systems and not civilian systems. But when it comes to training artificial intelligence in data centers, the exact same advanced chips that can train a car to drive autonomously can also train a drone to fly autonomously. And the challenge that we face is how to regulate those chips. Because there's no differentiation of what's civilian and what's military. The same chips can be very straightforwardly used to train AI in both contexts. And that is the key question facing us right now. What regulations ought we to have on the types of chips that are training AI systems when we've got no control over whether the type of AI that's trained in large data centers is for civilian and military uses. And so that, I think, is a key challenge for export controls that previous generations of regulations didn't have to deal with, because semiconductors today are more dual use than ever before.
Thank you, Mira Sensei. Wakabayashi-san and Ota-san, you have some comment, or maybe, I have more than 10 questions from audiences. May I introduce it to? Among the several things, the one is then, to Mira Sensei, the very basic questions that when we think about the semiconductor things, the geopolitical outlook is very important. How long will the US and China semiconductor conflict last or continue? How does it end? Of course, no one can answer this kind of things, but if you have any, the perspectives about it, please say some things about it.
Well, I think the key driver of the semiconductor conflict is not primarily about semiconductors. The key driver conflict is the military balance in East Asia. And the fact is that over the past 2 decades, the military balance, which used to be very heavily in favor of the United States, has swung in the direction of China. As China has built more advanced military systems and expanded the size of its Navy and its Air Force, its missile forces, it's now less clear than ever before, if there were a conflict in the Taiwan Straits, for example, which side would win. And as China's military has expanded quantitatively, it's become more important for the US to maintain its edge qualitatively. And the US has bet that the type of qualitative edge it has in terms of military technology, all of these qualitative edges are deeply dependent on computing power. And that's why the US military and the US security establishment is dead set on retaining advantages in semiconductor capabilities because their strategy is to deploy these computing capabilities to military systems and have better military systems that are good enough to offset the fact that there will be far more Chinese military systems in the Taiwan Straits. Now, today, as I mentioned, the military balance is more unclear than it's been at any point since really the 1950s, maybe the 1940s. And until that changes, until we get more clarity on the situation, I think we're unlikely to have a diminution of technological tensions because both of the key parties in this arms race are trying to deploy advanced technologies to military systems. And so long as that's happening, technology, I'm afraid, is going to be inevitably politicized.
Thank you. Maybe with regard to that, I had better fair to introduce the second questions. Some comment says that of course then the semiconductor, especially the cutting-edge semiconductor, can be used in the defense or the military use, but wider variety of the civilian application is also existing. And can you find out any middle ground, the kind of the set of restrictions that will prevent China from military use of advanced chips while not hampering the innovation in development and civilian use of most advanced chips in China? How you can reply to these questions?
Well, if you were to put that question to the US government, they would give you the following answer. They would say there's only one type of chip that is prohibited to export to China, and those are GPU chips that are used to train AI systems in data centers. And those are prohibited to transfer to China, also to Russia. However, Chinese firms, private sector firms, Alibaba or Tencent, are not prohibited from taking their data to a data center in Singapore or in India or in Japan or anywhere else and running their data on a data center using the most advanced chips in other countries. So right now, the restriction is only on transferring chips to China, not on Chinese firms' ability to access these chips for civilian purposes in other countries. Now, that's a middle ground of a sort. It's not likely to be that relevant because China is going to decide, in all likelihood, not to allow its firms to move data abroad and have it be processed in data centers in other countries. But right now, I don't know of a more viable middle ground because there's no way for the United States to know if it does transfer these types of advanced GPU chips to China, what use they're being put to in data centers. And there's no way to control or constrain the chip so that it's only used for one use case and not the other.
Thank you. With regard to the country's nature, or the countries or the region's nature, some other question focusing on how U.S. trusts Japan, as well as Korea or the Taiwan, and what kind of role that U.S. Seems to expect to Japan or Taiwan or the Korea, respectively. Maybe your explanation already existed, but if you made some comments to, especially about the Korea or the role between the Korea, Taiwan, and Japan.
Well, today, when you look at the chip industry, you find that there already is a lot of specialization between Korea, Taiwan, and Japan in terms of the role they play in the chip industry. Korea specializes above all in the production of memory chips, Taiwan in the production of processor chips, and Japan produces a fair number of chips itself, but also has really specialized and unique capabilities in certain materials and certain machine tools. There's already a lot of industrial specialization, but when it comes to a regulatory or a political sense, I think these countries fall in somewhat different categories. I would note that Korea has a security alliance with the United States. Japan does as well. Taiwan does not, which is an important factor in this dynamic. I would also note that views of Taiwan risk and views of China risk are quite different in Japan, in Korea, and certainly in Taiwan, where the concept of Taiwan being a risky place to produce large numbers of advanced semiconductors is obviously something that Taiwan's government and the Taiwanese populace doesn't agree with. So you certainly find very differing views of the issue, I think, when you have conversations with people in each of those three different countries. But when it comes to the thinking about the supply chain and thinking about how to stabilize the supply chain, I think what you find is that in South Korea, as well as in Japan, a fair amount of agreement that there has been too much concentration of advanced logic capacity in Taiwan. And in that sense, there's some alignment between those two countries as well as between the United States on the nature of the challenge.
Thank you. Maybe that we have, the 60 minutes already passed. We have, please allow me to extend another 5 minutes to allow the last comment from the Wakabayashi sensei, Ota sensei, and Mira sensei. So, Wakabayashi sensei?
Hi. Thank you very much. So I have the comments. So from viewpoint of the business strategy, semiconductor strategy. So you wrote in the books. So the old days are tic-tac strategy, copy technology, and USA's chip first technology. But I think that these technologies are no more difficult. So the US have a two dilemma. The China is the biggest market, but at the same time the biggest competitor. So that means we have a change mind the business strategy, not only from viewpoint of the business only, profit only, but also more public side or supply chain or contribution for the global technology. It's my comment. So it just means next time I give you, you give us the changing of the business strategy in semiconductor. How is the core key business factor in semiconductor business? Thank you very much.
Ota-san, please.
Well, whether we like it or not, I think we will end up with being in a phase where we should discuss the technological detente in some point, because this is not simply sustainable. So unless we can draw the clear line between what we can protect and what we don't need to protect. So this is my big question to the policymakers and political leaders in the West.
Thank you. So, Mila sensei, Professor Mila, please give us the final comments.
Well, I know we're already past our time, so I will, in my final comment, just thank you, Nishikawa-san, and thank our two commentators and all of the audience for a very interesting discussion.
Thank you. There are lots of issues is existing, not only the geopolitical things, but also economical things, and also just as Naoda-san said, what is the West? Taiwan is Taiwan is China, part of China. So and also the lots of military use as well as commercial use, various economical consideration as well as the military consideration. Everything should be considered toward the future. Of course, then as a government officer, I have no clear answer today, but we should think about continuously with our friends and our global peoples. Thank you. So maybe today's the presentation and the seminar will end. Just as Professor Mira explained, his Japanese version book will issued next month. So I'm looking forward to read it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.